7:15 now. Yesterday morning we talked about the future of South Bank. A number of Expo 88 buildings have gone under the big ball, or had the bulldozer crash through them in recent weeks. And naturally enough, some people have been a little bit teary-eyed, more bits of Expo disappearing. So we went in search of some more Expo 88 buildings. If you want that nostalgia trip, we have found, and our reporter Anne O'Keefe is live outside the Queensland Pavilion from Expo. And it still has, I'm looking at this photo that Anne's posted on Twitter, at twitter.com/612Brisbane. The big Queensland flag is there. It still says Queensland Pavilion. Hello, Anne.
Hello, Spencer. Yes, I tell you, I drove into this facility, which I'll tell you about where it is in a moment, and I got goosebumps. The hairs on my arms stood up. The memories came flooding back. I was transported back to a 19-year-old, and it's just incredible to think that that piece of history is still with us, and people can actually come and see it. So we are at the Gateway Baptist Church, or this is actually known as the Gateway Centre, and it is essentially the Queensland Pavilion in all its glory. It has been lovingly restored, sort of set up again, and it's very, very familiar, particularly when you first come across it. It's just incredible. And with me is Brian Andrew, who's former pastor of the Gateway Baptist Church. Brian, what an amazing thing for Brisbane. We thank you for restoring this and having this as a beautiful memento of Expo 88.
Yeah, we're very proud of it. The whole project of taking it from a heap of rusted steel and a paddock down near Beenleigh to having a strong resemblance to the original pavilion was a great volunteer effort.
Tell us about that process. So you've mentioned it was in a paddock in Beenleigh. How did it get from the Expo site to there?
A businessman purchased a number of the Expo pavilion. I think he sensed an opportunity there, put them down in a big paddock, and then people from around the state bought them and resurrected them as community centres, and in our case, a church. And our church, in fact, was exploding in growth. We purchased the 32 acres of land here, and then we began to get quotes on designing and putting up a new building. They were really prohibitive. One of our team members heard about this field of rusting steel, so we took a look, and somebody said this was the Queensland Pavilion. And it just looked like a totally useless pile of steel, and they said, well, nobody wants it. It's too hard to resurrect it.
Just incredible to think that it's been pretty much put together piece by piece to yeah, as you say, resemble the pavilion. Different colour, it is painted beige these days, but those very familiar information boards that used to rotate, Spencer, and show the different sceneries from Queensland, they are still here, which is just wonderful to see. We were discussing before, Brian, we don't know whether they can still be rotated, maybe by hand, but how many people actually did it take to put this pavilion back together?
Well, we had a mixture of professionals and volunteers, mostly volunteers, but of course, for example, we had a fantastic structural engineer, and he looked at the pile of steel, and where others said it couldn't be done, he said, I could redesign that. And so we took the original pavilion, designed some new structures, space frame structures, and resurrected it with hundreds and hundreds of volunteers, tirelessly working over many, many months, over in fact a couple of years, to end up with an incredible community facility that really works, like you can see this morning.
And we can hear all the, obviously there are sound effects CDs there with various birds and things, Anne.
Yes, I flew them in specially. Well, how Queensland is that? But we've been looking at some photos, Spencer. Brian has a great photo album of the process that it took to get this centre put together. And so what year did you actually start the project?
We started the project in 1990. And as I mentioned, it took a lot of work, a lot of volunteers. We actually bought the pile of twisted steel for about $230,000.
And Spencer, the pavilion was worth $16 million, I think, when it was originally installed. So that's a bargain.
And we had it sandblasted and straightened, and we salvaged what was usable and designed new parts to make it functional. So we've got a 1,500-seat auditorium and many multi-use rooms as well. There we go.
And I believe that there were other things that were taken from the Expo site as well. You guys kind of were very resourceful, shall I say?
Well, what happened, some of you may remember, there was the Expo Fun Park next to the original Expo venue, which didn't succeed economically. It went bung as a business. And we were shown some favour And so on Saturdays, for example, we would have up to 100 volunteers plundering the old Expo Fun Park. One of our team during the week would go and say, how much do you want for that door or those windows or whatever? It was almost like a scene from the castle. And the liquidator or administrator would say, oh, you can have that for $200, you can have that for $5,000. So we would have all these volunteers clambering over the fun park, salvaging everything from cable to windows to air conditioning unit, and it was a lot of fun. We nearly lost one of our volunteers. In fact, he was up very high one day, probably not complying with workplace health and safety, but he actually fell from a fairly high place towards concrete, and his ankle got tied up in a loose cable which prevented him from, going headfirst on the concrete. So apart from that scary incident, it was a lot of fun and very successful, and it made the centre financially viable to get a lot more done.
Well, look, it's amazing, Spencer, just a wonderful trip down memory lane and a very valuable community resource, particularly in this area. So if people are wanting to come and have a look, you just need to find the Gateway Baptist Church on Mount Gravatt, Capalaba Road at Mackenzie.
Take your passport.
Big sign.
Take your Expo passport and get a stamp.
I'm standing here with my season pass waiting. I'm queuing to get in.
Don't mention the queues. All right. Good one, Anne. The Queensland Pavilion tracked down, and if you know of any other bits and bobs from Expo 88, be sure to let us know.